Welcome to The Rest is Politics Leading with me, Rory Stewart.
And with me, Alistair Campbell. And I am delighted to be here in Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, with the country's president, Nikos Christodoulides.
Excellent.
Is that okay?
Yes.
This former British colony, independent since 1960, Mediterranean island situated right at the crossroads of Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. And I'm just thinking we've got Greece to the northwest, we've got Turkey above, we've got Syria and Lebanon there, then you've got Israel and Gaza, and you've got Egypt to the south.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues that Rory and I talk about on this podcast, war and peace, climate, migration, swirling geopolitics, changing nature of alliances, these are all things that the president has to deal with. And literally just before we met, just to put this in the time context for people, two quite big developments. First of all, a British man arrested on charges of spying for Iran at one of the two British bases that are situated here. And of course, the United States dropping their famed bunker busters. Briefly, your background, former diplomat, former foreign minister with a PhD in political science, and rose to the presidency. You'll be interested in this, Rory, because it's what you really would fancy doing, by leaving your party, running as an independent, and becoming president 2 years ago, and soon taking over the presidency of the European Union. So thank you for having us here. Rory's in London, I'm here in Cyprus. And I think can we start with what's actually happening in the world right now and what's happening in the Middle East? And first of all, I guess, just ask you this, how scared do you think the world should be of what's happening right now?
First of all, let me welcome you to Nicosia, the last divided capital of the world. Let me welcome you to the presidential palace, which used to be the house of the British governor.
I know.
Until 1960. Let me welcome you in a region that is mainly known for its problems and its challenges. Being in the region, I don't fully agree with this narrative because I really believe that this region has unique potential if we work together. This is something that we're trying to do through our foreign policy and the fact that we have excellent relations with all of our neighbors.
All of them?
All of them except Turkey. And if it is possible, we want to have also with Turkey. We cannot change geography. I cannot move Cyprus being a neighbor of Switzerland. And I don't want, weather conditions are not so advantageous to be there. But I really believe that we are living in a new international order. We had the collapse of Cold War. Mm-hmm. A new era started immediately after. But now we're living in a world with a lot of strong powers, middle powers, and other countries, including Cyprus, small countries. And the biggest challenge that we are facing, both today in the Middle East, but also in Ukraine, is the fact that if we don't solve the problems through diplomatic means, my biggest concern, and especially in this region, and we witnessed this also in the past, is the fact that a vacuum will be created, and we will see the development of non-state actors, of Malayan actors, that will try to play a leading role in our neighborhood. And this is very, very dangerous. And that is why, from the very beginning, and I don't want in any way to exaggerate the role that Cyprus can play. But as I told you, we have excellent relations with all neighboring countries, and we're trying to mediate, to play a role, to ask all of them to sit around the same table and start discussing. It wasn't easy at the beginning, but we said, what is the motto? Agreeing, disagreeing? What is the...
What do we do, Rory?
Disagreeing agreeably.
Okay. Something like that. We said, let's put aside the difficult political issues. Let's put aside the security issues, the security differences that all of us will have. And let's start discussing on so-called, because I don't consider them, the so-called low politics issue, and try to work together. Like climate. Is it possible for Cyprus to face climate change without working with Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, and the countries of the region? No.
And Turkey.
And Turkey, including Turkey. So let's start discussing on a positive agenda on those issues that we don't have an alternative than to work together. And we did it.
This is a great way in. And of course, we're talking at a moment just after the US strikes on Iran. And what strikes me as strange about it is that if we were having this conversation 15, 20 years ago, we would assume at the beginning of your career as a Cypriot diplomat that people would be going to the United Nations, that the United Nations would have been at the center of this discussion. People would have been talking about international law, they would have been discussing at the Security Council, they would have been talking at the General Assembly. That's not happening. Instead, the United States launched its attack on Iran with no consultation with the UN and no procedural consultation with its allies. What does this suggest? I mean, how do we rebuild the UN for middle countries like you in a world in which great powers are simply ignoring it?
That's why I start by saying that we are living in a new international order.
And do you think that order is now it's fixed? There's no going back?
The UN, it was a product of following World War II. So today we have a new international order. And of course we need the UN. But we need also to touch on difficult political issues with regard to the UN in order the UN to continue to have a role. For example, Security Council, permanent members. The 5 permanent members that we have today represent today's reality. Is it possible India, for example, not to be part of, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council? Where is the European Union? Where is Brazil?
So would you kick Britain and France off there?
No, not at all. Especially, I mean, both of them, they should be there for a number of reasons that we can discuss later, especially with the UK, because for Cyprus there is this special link between the UK. But what I'm trying to say is that we have a new international order. What we are seeing today, it's very important the transition from the old international order to the new one to be smooth. Otherwise, we're going to have all those non-state actors, Malayan actors that will play the leading role.
But if you take the 5 now, Russia, China, and now America, it strikes me are acting without virtually no regard to the United Nations. They're all doing their own thing.
Yeah, and this is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very, very dangerous, and especially for small countries.
But look how just in the last few days, how few leaders have even called it out because they're so scared of the big powers. So how do you, small country, but European Union member, how do you actually confront that?
What we're trying to do as a small EU member state, but at the same time part of the region, is to send a message to everybody that these differences, the problems that we have, cannot be solved through military means.
Easier said.
And we're trying to show it in action, even before the war. That's why I told you before, and that was our message to the region, that if we work together in those low politics issues, and all of us will see the benefit out of this cooperation, it will be much more easier to discuss also difficult political issues. And there are certain issues that need to be solved before in order to reach that stage. I'll give you an example. I'm sure both of you know very well the Abraham Accords. Great success in the region. Israel, UAE, the United States. It didn't last. Why? Because the Palestinian issue is there, and it will continue to poison, I'm talking about our region, everything that can be positively developed in this region. Even now with Iran and Israel, those non-state actors that I mentioned before, they will use this situation, they will use the Palestinian issue in order to create this very dangerous situation in our region. So we need, and this is something also positive for the UK, if I can mention it now, we're very glad that we see the UK back in the region, not in a neo-colonial approach. I'm not talking about a neo-colonial approach. I'm talking working together with the region. Our region has a lot of problems, has a lot of challenges. But at the same time, as I told you, there are a lot of promises. And the changes that they need to take place in our region, the countries of the region, they need to have the ownership of the change, not try to impose. And to tell you the truth, it was difficult for us and the European Union. I can talk also on behalf of the European Union. Following Brexit, the fact that the UK, it was absent from the international developments.
Just for a second before we get on to the UK, there is this vacuum. There is an amazing opportunity for the European Union to stand up for the old rules-based international order, to stand up for the interests of smaller countries. But we're not really seeing it. In fact, if you look around the world, it looks as though medium-sized powers like Turkey are able to transform the situation in Syria, transform the situation in Armenia. UAE is able to have a big foreign policy in Sudan and Somalia. And where is the European Union? You have one of the largest economies in the world. What's happening?
Thank you very, very much for your question. You very correctly describe the situation with the European Union. We are absent from the region. And that is why, during our presidency that starts on January 1st, 2026, is to bring the European Union closer to the region. And that is why, to give you also something which is not known, on April 23rd, we are planning to organize in Cyprus a meeting of the 27 leaders of the European Union with all the leaders of the countries in the region in Cyprus. And we are working not just to have a very nice declaration, to have substantial...
So just tell us which countries they will be.
All the countries of the Gulf, also India, and also our neighbors here, Jordan, Egypt. If Turkey wants to come, we are more than happy to host also the Turkish president. As I told you, we cannot change geography.
But it's interesting how you put Turkey at the end of that. Would you want Turkey to be there?
Of course I want Turkey to be here.
And have you asked them to be there?
Of course we can ask Turkey to be here. This administration also changed its approach towards Turkey. For example, we're in favor of having substantial progress on the EU-Turkey relationship. I told you, we cannot change geography. I prefer to have a neighbor that is close to European Union instead of a neighbor that follows other dangerous paths. So, in our argument, I will finish with the European Union, in Brussels, and I'm going on Wednesday, and the issue of the Middle East is also in our agenda, and I have some talks with my colleagues before going there, is that if we want to have a geopolitical European Union, you need to be at the same time to be in a position to deal with Ukraine, but also with the Middle East. I fully understand the importance of Ukraine, the security issues of Ukraine. But if we cannot have also a role in this region, which at the end of the day is the neighborhood of the European Union, we should not aspire a geopolitical role. And something else, the third point, and I finish with the European Union. We are in a process of changing as a European Union. We are changing because of international developments. As a European Union, we were fully dependent on our security on the United States, fully dependent on energy from Russia, and fully dependent on raw materials from China. How can we be a geopolitical European Union with a strong role in today's world?
Just to go back to Rory's point, though, would you be prepared to say that there is at least a question about the legality of what the United States have done? Would you be able to say that you think the International Criminal Court of Justice is right to indict Putin over Ukraine? And would you say that there is at least a question over the legality of some of what Israel has been doing in relation to Gaza?
But my question to your three questions is, all of us will have the same understanding of legality, international legality today? No. We have the same?
But that gives everybody a free pass.
I give you an example. No. Unfortunately, that's why we are going to a different path. Let's discuss Ukraine. We have the Russian invasion in Ukraine, right? And the international community very correctly is criticizing Russia. Why we don't the same criticism from what Turkey is doing to Cyprus? Because the international law, at the end of the day, is interpreted based on the power of the country that is interpreting the international law. Unfortunately, what is the difference between...
But with respect, you've very cleverly avoided saying anything about America or about
I'm
Israel.
Not avoiding, and I don't have as a small country. I'll answer your question. As a small country, my biggest and strongest tool is international law. I don't have an army to impose to Turkey to leave Cyprus.
So you should be loudly defending international law.
Of course, and that is why we have excellent relations with Israel. Israel is our closest ally in the region, but at the same time, we recognize Palestine. At the same time, we are in favor of the two-state solution, because the one-state solution cannot be a solution in the Palestine issue. For small countries, international law is a kind of a safety net. But I'm not the one, and it's not my country, that is interpreting Exactly.
Trump and Iran?
Interpreting international law.
Why is it? I notice with smaller countries, and maybe this is an unfair question, that people are very comfortable criticizing Iran, but very reluctant to criticize the United States or Israel. Why is this? I mean, it's not that small countries don't criticize anybody, just small countries are selective in who they criticize when it comes to international law. Is that right?
So you want me to criticize? Okay, I'll criticize all of them. I don't have any problem. First of all, in case that Iran has the capabilities for nuclear weapons, my country is in danger also. Mm-hmm. We are 30 minutes away from Israel. So you can imagine what is going to happen in Cyprus. At the same time, those that they intervene from far away, they need to take under consideration the consequences from the countries of the region. So of course I can criticize. But when you are in politics, the easiest thing to do is to criticize. The most difficult is to find solutions.
But
and
on your
we
point,
are here and we have responsibility towards our people to find solutions.
But on your point about, and listen, Rory and I talk about this all the time, wouldn't it be great if people could work together more constructively, operate according to principles and so forth? And here you're saying you want to play a role in bringing countries together and solving problems together. And yet, right on your doorstep, you have a problem which appears to be insurmountable. So isn't there a danger that people say, well, yeah, great, put yourself forward as the great negotiator, the great reconciliator and so forth, but you can't even resolve this issue on your doorstep. How does it ever get resolved?
We are trying. We are supporting the efforts of the international community. We are trying our best, but in order to solve the problem in our region, unfortunately, it's not going to be solved based on international law.
Politics.
Power politics and the incentives to the countries that are involved in order to see the benefit out of a political solution and not a military solution. I'm not expecting, and I'm not naive, I'm coming again to Cyprus, that Turkey will recognize the legality of the invasion, of the occupation. He'll say, oh, sorry, we violated the human rights in Cyprus and we are leaving Cyprus and we apologize. Unfortunately, we are living in an anarchic world. Turkey will solve the Cyprus problem only if the benefits out of the solution are much more important than the benefits that Turkey is getting from the current situation. The same with Iran and Israel. Only if they see the benefits out of the political solution in this case. Can we control, for example, to be specific, that Iran will not have nuclear capabilities? If we can safeguard this, it means that Israel doesn't have to worry. At the same time, for Iran to do it, some things will take place in Iran.
Mr. President, one of the things that I guess must be frustrating for you is outsiders talking about the situation in Cyprus without understanding it. And a very common analogy is people will say, what are the lessons, for example, from Northern Ireland? Can you explain for an international audience what is unique about Cyprus and why, for example, the lessons from Northern Ireland cannot be applied very well in Cyprus?
The uniqueness about Cyprus, it is geographical position. We are a predictable, reliable country in a region of great geopolitical importance, and you can see with the development, but also a lot of other factors. We are a member state of the European Union, and at the same time, we are part of the European Union. We can have some lessons from Northern Ireland, but it is a different situation in Cyprus. In order, and I really believe this, because my alternative is to sit here and say about international law, human rights, etc., which I don't. I mean, I fully understand how important are. But because we're living in this anarchic world, we need to find the ways for the countries to see the incentives by working together. I know that it's not easy. I'll give you the example with the Syrian regime. We start lifting the sanctions in a step-by-step approach. If they deliver, we deliver.
But the problem with the Cypriot issue, it seems to me in the previous negotiations, is that the methodology has been very different to that. The methodology has been until everything is resolved, nothing is resolved. And so there's no possibility of doing a step-by-step process. And therefore, it strikes me that I don't get any sense of how this gets resolved in the way that you're describing, you want to resolve other difficult international issues.
Okay.
It feels completely intractable.
This is one of the basic principles of the negotiation is that nothing is agreed until everything
But maybe that should be changed.
is agreed as you mentioned. But since 2004 in Cyprus, we have a new factor that it changes everything.
Europe.
Exactly. The whole of Ireland joined the European Union, but the implementation of the acquis was suspended in the areas not under the effective control of the Republic of Cyprus. I was part of the last negotiating process in 2017 that we came very close to the solution of the Cyprus problem.
Did you really want that to succeed?
Of course, because the current status quo is very dangerous. You know, there are no frozen conflicts.
But you have the best.
There are no
side of
frozen conflicts. The situation might change in one day. Look what happened in Gaza, for example, or in Ukraine. My country cannot reach its full potential without the solution of the Cyprus problem. It's not easy for Cyprus to face Turkey on all international fora. Think of Cyprus having access to the Turkish market. You know that the ships that bearing the Cypriot flag cannot reach the Turkish ports. Imagine all those positive developments through the solution of the Cyprus problem. And a lot of other benefits for Turkey. I mean, we can reach a win-win situation. But going to the European Union, most of the issues that we're discussing at the table of the negotiations, the solutions are in the European Union, are in the European Membership Union. The best safety for both Greek Cyprus and Turkish Cyprus is being member of the European Union.
Can you just, again, for international listeners, explain how your citizens view the situation in North Cyprus, and then also do something which is also more difficult, which is to try to sympathize with the way that some of the population, some of the Turkish population in North Cyprus view the situation, and how that act of imaginative empathy, of understanding the other situation, can help you towards a solution?
Come on, you're a diplomat, you can do this.
First of all, Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, they don't have any problem. You know that before 2003, it wasn't possible to cross from the free areas of the Republic to the occupied areas. In 2003, the then Turkish Cypriot leader, Rauf Denktash, who was a hardliner in favor of the two-state solution, was obliged, because of the prospect of Cyprus joining the European Union in 6 months in 2004, to open the crossing points between the free areas and the areas under the control of Turkey. He was under the impression that in 1 week, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots will kill each other, and he will prove his point that, look, we cannot live together. So the two-state solution is the only solution on the Cyprus problem. It didn't happen. There is no problem between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. The problem is between Cyprus and Turkey, and is related with the role that Turkey wants to play in this neighborhood. And you can listen to President Erdogan and some neo-Ottoman statements, that some policies that not only Cyprus, but also the countries of the region, they don't like.
You actually had, I think you had a sort of, not a tete-a-tete because other leaders were there. You had a meeting with Erdogan not so long ago. Mm-hmm. What's the personal relationship? Do you see anything there that can be built and improved? And are there political risks to you of maybe being too nice about Erdogan?
I witnessed a change. I have to admit this. It wasn't possible even in international fora when we were approaching Turkish politicians to talk to us, even to talk to us. And my message when I saw Mr. Erdogan, it was in Albania during the EPC meeting, the European Political Community, was that we need to sit together and discuss. We're in favor, and that was my first message, we're in favor of Turkey coming closer to the European Union. We are ready to discuss the customs union, that it is an issue of great importance for Turkey. We are ready to discuss the visa liberalization issue, which is very important for Turkey. But we need to start discussing together.
But you wouldn't ever want them in the European Union?
Cyprus? Yeah. Yes.
And what about him and you being in NATO?
Of course I want Turkey in the European Union, but I know that a lot of countries are hiding behind Cyprus. Let's be honest.
So, Alistair, Mr. President, let's take a quick break. Mr. President, What has the experience been like for you? So for listeners, my understanding is that you were Cyprus's answer to Alistair Campbell before you became Cyprus's answer to Tony Blair. Tell us a little bit about what the experience is from going from being initially a diplomat and then somebody who was the chief spokesman for the government into being a serving politician. What does it feel like to become a politician? In fact, maybe you can give Alistair some advice when he considers his own political future.
At 68.
It is not very popular, not only in Cyprus, but in Europe in general, to be a politician nowadays. So, yes, I was a young diplomat. I started my career from London. It was the best place to start your career as a diplomat, dealing with the diplomats in the Foreign Office. Then I moved to Athens. I moved to Brussels. Brussels was a great school, being there as a spokesperson of the first Cyprus presidency. When the former president was elected, the minister of foreign affairs that he was appointed, he asked me to come in Cyprus, director of his office and diplomatic advisor of the president and Sherpa. I was there during Brexit. I can give you a lot of details that you can use. I'm sure that you have more inside information than myself. And when I became a minister of foreign affairs, I was getting this encouragement from the people to run for president. But at the same time, the leader of my party wanted to run for a president. So they wanted me to make a decision by January 2022 to go publicly out and say that I support the leader of the party. And I wasn't in a position to do it because during that time, I didn't took the decision to run for president. But they want me to do this statement. I said, I can't do it. I quit. And I start going to the people, discussing with the people. Moving from party politics to people politics.
Yeah, but how is the party system not the same as the UK then?
Because the party system is really strong in Cyprus.
Right, so you left the party?
Yes. And I ran as an independent.
Right, but how did that work?
And it was the first time actually in the history of the Republic of Cyprus that someone that didn't have the support of the two big parties was elected.
Yeah.
The reason I think that I succeeded is the fact that I went to the people. I visited all villages, all towns in the free areas of the Republic. I discussed with the people. They felt that, and that was very rightly, I felt that I was one of them. I prepared my program, talking with the people, and I was elected.
Where would you know British politics very well? Where would you be on our political spectrum, left to right? Let's say we've got Jeremy Corbyn over here.
No, I don't have. I mean, I know Jeremy, but I don't have.
We've got Jeremy Corbyn over here, and we've got, I don't know, Rory, give me a name.
Liberal Democrats today, or...
You?
Yes.
Liberal Democrat?
Or, yeah, of course. I'm coming from the Liberal Party, but I'm not a neoliberalist. I'm a social liberalist. I'm more than the third wave of Tony Blair. You invested this new wave. I mean, free economy. I'm against taxes. Taxes are killing business people. But at the same time, the state has certain responsibilities on health, on education, to provide to its people the same.
So you wouldn't define yourself in our terms as a conservative?
Today, conservatives?
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, Kemi.
You've managed to offend both of us. That's absolutely amazing.
No, he hasn't offended me. He says he's a Blairite. He's fine. He's fine.
Mr. President, tell us a little bit about these British bases. So last time I was in Cyprus, I came with the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, and we went and saw the bases, and we met with the government. Many people in Britain don't know about the bases, don't understand about them, and maybe some people in Cyprus are not comfortable with them. Can you explain what these bases are, why they're there? Are they doing anything useful for Cyprus or Britain?
The bases are the result of the colonization of Cyprus by the UK. There is a disagreement between Cyprus and the UK on the issue of sovereign bases or not. The UK government considers the bases as sovereign. We don't consider the bases as a sovereign British area. We have this disagreement.
Another intractable problem.
Look, we have a love and hate relationship with the UK, but I have to admit that I'm very happy with the way the new Prime Minister is handling the situation. You know that the new UK Prime Minister was the first one to visit Cyprus after 53 years in a bilateral visit. After 53 years, and He arrived Cyprus through the Larnaca air.
Not the bases.
Exactly, which this is very important. He's in power for how long? We met 3 times, 2 in London and 1 in Cyprus. And we're working very closely together, And putting now my hat as a leader of an EU member state, we're very glad that we see a new page in the EU-UK relationship.
Would you be happier if the British bases weren't here?
Of course, I will be much more happy.
But you're happy to live with it?
It is an issue of disagreement. We don't agree. In a number of cases that we're discussing the Cyprus problem, I mean, let's go back in 2004. It was the first time that we have a plan that was put for the people in a referendum to vote for the solution of the Cyprus problem. The British bases were part of the deal.
Do you say to Keir Starmer, you gave away the British bases in Diego Garcia very happily. Why don't you give away the bases in Cyprus?
Some things cannot be said publicly, so we are starting from the issues that we agree in order to reach the issues that we disagree.
Can I ask you about the issue of corruption and crime?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you'd accept that Cyprus has a real problem in terms of its global image because of the whole golden...
We used to have a serious problem.
But these things endure.
Yeah.
These things endure.
Yeah.
I wonder, for example, how you feel about the influence of Russian money in Cyprus and actually whether that relates in any way to... Let me put it another way. Did you feel under pressure to come out with a pretty strong line on Russia-Ukraine? Does the presence of Russia and Russian money here inhibit you in any way?
No, our position on the Russian-Ukraine, it was very easy one because we were facing the similar situation like Ukraine. But on the issue of corruption, I will be fully honest with you. We did serious mistake as a country. We left our past behind. When I became president in 2023, I had a case with an international media that was saying about Cyprus corruption and etc. So I called the Americans and I told them I need a team from FBI that they don't have any link in Cyprus to send it in Cyprus to support me to clean with all those cases in Cyprus. And I was grateful that the United States replied immediately. They sent me a team in Cyprus. We clean all cases, and now we are reintroducing our country to the international arena. Recently, I was in a road show in New York, Texas, and Silicon Valley to bring U.S. investment in Cyprus. Back in 2013, the major shareholders of our banks, they were Russians. Today, the major shareholders of our banks are Americans. I will ask you to check the last report from Moneyball, what they are saying about Cyprus and all the measures that we did. So I'm proud for the fact that we face this huge challenge of corruption in my country, and we are following a new path.
Can I ask you about the church, the role of the church, and whether it's still a very powerful force in Cyprus, and also about your own faith, whether you're a man of faith?
I am a man of faith, but this is a purely personal issue.
I
talk, but I don't use it in international politics.
No, but it's the faith is real as opposed to you feel you have to have faith because of the power of the church.
It's not because of the power of the church. I believe in faith and believe in church because of my personal experience. For example, I lost my brother at the age of 50. My religion was very important for me to pass through this very difficult moment. The role of church in Cyprus is not the same that it used to be before 10 years, before 20 years, before 30 years. And the church in Cyprus used to have a powerful role because the church led the anti-liberation struggle against the UK, against the British. And that is why our first president was the Archbishop of Cyprus for 17 years. But the role of church is getting less and less important.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
It is a good thing. As a president, I don't get involved in not the politics, the business of the church. They should not get involved in politics. The Archbishop is talking publicly a number of times, positioning the church on issues that I disagree with him. And when I meet him, I say, I disagree with this issue. At the end of the day, I need to decide.
Tell me a little bit about what you have learnt about the correct strategic policy for a smaller country. So I guess you're a country, you're bigger than Malta, you're slightly bigger than Estonia, you may be bigger than Montenegro, smaller than Kosovo. I mean, can you help us understand, is there a particular way of thinking? Do you ever get together with people who have countries maybe between 500,000 and 2 million people? How do you think about those issues?
In Cyprus, we used to have the impression that we are the center of the world. We used to think that every morning they wake up in London, Washington, Moscow, and they think, what I'm going to do today with Cyprus and the Cyprus problem. That was our impression for a number of years. Being a diplomat, being in a number of discussions with foreign leaders, either ministers of foreign affairs or presidents, and then becoming a politician, I fully understand that for a small country, first of all, you need to be relevant in the international system. The United States or the UK will not help us to solve the Cyprus problem if this is not the benefit of the United States or the UK. So in order to understand the Brits and the Americans that they have an interest to solve the Cyprus problem, they need first to see that they have an interest from a functional, reliable, predictable government and country in this very important region. So we fully change our foreign policy. When I'm going to Brussels, I need to intervene in all issues and not only when I hear the word Turkey. Otherwise, nobody will think seriously of my country and, of course, myself.
So the answer to Rory's question is you feel that the small countries have to think and operate like bigger countries. They shouldn't see themselves as small countries. Yeah.
And following the terrorist attack of Hamas in Israel, October 2023, we developed in Cyprus this idea of the humanitarian corridor, to send humanitarian assistance from Cyprus to Gaza. Gaza was under Israeli blockade for 17 years. And I remember I went to Paris. President Macron organized a Gaza forum, peace forum. And I went there with my Minister of Foreign Affairs. It was end of October, beginning of November. And I presented this idea of the humanitarian corridor. Nobody was interested. Nobody. And we start working with the Emiratis and the Americans.
And the Brits.
And the Brits. Actually, the Brits, they were the first. Thank you for the correction. They were the first one to send a ship from Cyprus to Israel. But we did it. It was the first time that Cyprus became internationally known for positive news.
Just on that, I was going to ask you about the maritime scheme. Where's that gone?
No, we're still working on this. And of course, recently I went to Israel and Palestine. I visited Prime Minister Netanyahu. I visited President Abbas. And we're working with the Emiratis, especially with the Emiratis, to send humanitarian assistance, not directly to Gaza, but to Ashdod, the port there, in order to be sent in Gaza.
How do you feel about Gaza right now, at the emotional level?
Very, very disappointed. And the worst development is that nobody's discussing Gaza today. Everybody's discussing Iran and Israel, and we have kids dying every day in Gaza.
Don't you think that part of Netanyahu's thinking in pivoting to Iran may actually be to stop the world talking about Gaza? Or am I being too cynical about Bibi?
I don't think so that it was part of his strategy.
Iran?
No, that he did it with Iran in order to...
You don't?
No.
Do you think deep down, Netanyahu's been around a long, long time. I sort of have a sense of a lot of people around the world now. I think we have leaders of some of the more high-profile countries, America, Russia, Israel, that really are, that sometimes cynicism about politicians is justified.
Of course. This is the case with a lot of leaders.
But you think what he's doing in Iran, you think is all about the Iran nuclear program? There's no other broader political agenda going on?
I don't see a broader political agenda, especially with Iran. Talking with them, knowing them very well, and also at the level of the people, it's not only Netanyahu. Do you see someone from the opposition being against what's going on with Iran in Israel?
No.
Let me bring you again closer to your region. When we look around the region, many, many places seem to be in a situation of serious instability. Almost failed states. Libya, Syria, Lebanon's not functioning very well. I mean, this is very problematic, right? I mean, these are major countries with serious resources who ought to be contributors to stability and are deeply destabilized and stable. Tell us what's your analysis of this situation? What's going to happen over the next 20 years? Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya?
I will answer you, even though I will disappoint Alistair. The failures of the region and whatever you describe is not because of the region. It's because of the international community. It's because of the Arab Spring, which turned to be an Arab winter in this region. And I see this also in a number of discussions that we have in the European Union. In Brussels, we're discussing about Egypt, for example. Egypt, a country that has a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. They have certain things that we don't like. We don't have it in Europe. And you know what is the position of some of my colleagues? We need to go and impose to Egypt this and this and this. But is it possible to impose in a country of 100 million people to change? They need to have the ownership of the change. And that's what we're trying to do with the countries of the region. So with the Arab Spring, the West, and I'm in favor of the West, don't get me wrong, we were under the impression that we will change the region in a Western democracy. Sorry, this is the Gulf, this is the Middle East, and you need to know. You know, I will mention one example. I was as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, Association Council of European Union with Jordan, and all the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, we were there together with my then colleague, he's still the Foreign Minister of Jordan, Ayman. And one of my colleagues from a Scandinavian country, he was pushing him, you need to change this, and women rights, LGBTI, a lot of issues that, you know, for a Western democracy, you know, they were very, very valid points. You know what was his reaction? Before you dictate to me what I have to do for my country, you need to see geography. The neighbor of my country is Iran, whether the neighbor of your country is Denmark. So as a European Union, I'm going back to the European Union. That is where we need to raise awareness. We know this region as a European Union and the West in general, to criticize also the West. Whenever we want to sell military weapons. We know these countries. We go to those countries of the region that are rich. But at the same time, we're the first to criticize them. We need to have an honest relationship with the countries of the region and work together.
So are you basically saying that the West is often arrogant and hypocritical?
Of course, especially towards this region.
Why did you think I would be disappointed by that?
No, I'm talking about the Arab Spring and the Arab Winter, and I remember back then everybody celebrating about the Arab Spring. Libya is because of Syria, all the countries of the region. I mean, we cannot impose. We passed the colonial era. We cannot impose in any country. We need to work with the countries of the region.
You're describing something very difficult. On the one hand, you say we must not impose. On the other hand, you say we need international law. And then back on the one hand, you say, yeah, but nobody pays any attention to international law. The strong do what they want. The weak must accept what they do. International law is hypocritical. Look at Turkey, look at the US. What is the kind of international law that is actually possible? What kind of international structure is possible? What are we supposed to be defending? State sovereignty, human rights, international borders? I mean, what do you think is the important thing? If there's going to be any international law, what do you think the 2 or 3 fundamental principles of this law should be? And how are you going to get the US, China, Russia to agree to these things?
The most important is the state sovereignty. I still believe on the role of the state. So the most important is the state sovereignty. Regarding how we'll do this and how we'll reach that stage, I don't aspire Cyprus to play the leading role. We are not a country that we can impose to anybody. But we need to understand, and I really believe this, we are living in a new international order. And I can speak on behalf also of the European Union. as a European Union, we have a special role to play, and we can bring all different actors. You mentioned United States, China, Russia, other actors. We can bring all the actors together to sit together and discuss and agree the way forward. This is the real power, I believe, of the European Union.
We're doing this interview on the 9th anniversary of the Brexit referendum in 2016. I'd just ask you, you were a government spokesman. Imagine you were a government spokesman for Boris Johnson's government. Tell me.
He was a colleague of mine as a Minister of Foreign Affairs.
I know. Tell me a Brexit benefit.
For me?
Anyone.
Or for the UK?
Anyone.
For
Anyone.
the UK?
Any Brexit benefit.
Not a single one. I fully respect the will of the British people, but I was against Brexit. It is a lose-lose situation, both for the UK and the European Union. And that's why I'm very glad that we start again working together.
So in your presidency that's upcoming,
we are going to work I will mention also this publicly. We are planning also to invite the British Foreign Minister during the Gymnich and also the European EU Minister during the Gymnich. Gymnich is the informal meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, because we need to work together with the UK, and we are very glad that we see this positive reaction from the new British government. I was Sherpa is the advisor of the President for EU affairs, and I was Sherpa during the Brexit. And I remember, I don't criticize the government back then, but I remember the government back then saying that the Remain vote would be 60-70%. That was the message in Brussels.
Your party, Rory, David Cameron and George Osborne, complacency.
Your friend David Cameron, Alistair.
Complacency. Well, listen, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Mr. President, thank you. That was very generous of you to give so much time, and I'm sorry that I'm not with you in person, but thank you. We really appreciate it, and it's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the interview, but also for dealing with this region. And as I told you before, it's very important that the UK is part of the region, because UK first and France secondly, they have a responsibility for this region.
History. You're not saying Britain is more powerful than France?
No. Historically.
Okay. I'm just trying to correct your spin here.
Historically, they have a responsibility for this region. We're working together with the UK and France in order to raise awareness about the importance of this.
Do you think we, the Brits, should feel more guilty about some of the consequences of colonization?
Of course. I'm not in favor of colonization. I mean, I don't want to close with an unhappy note, but one of the reasons of the Cyprus problem today is divide and rule policy of the British colonization era. But at the same time, I'm very glad that at least I can have this discussion with the British Prime Minister. Before 10 years, 20 years, that wasn't possible.
Not 20 years. You had a good go. 10 years I'll give you. Before that was fine. Listen, it was very nice to see the symbol of the crown.
But we have also the symbol of the Republic above from the symbol of the of the crown.
Yeah. Well, that's a happier note than the earlier one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, so much.
Thank you.